Hi, and welcome back. My name's Pazzi, and this is lesson 2 of my programming with Lua for ComputerCraft. Today we're going to be talking about variables and variable types, and how to use variables and why they're important for programming. So with that said, let's jump right in. First off, I'm just going to pull up a random file. So first of all, what is a variable? A variable in Lua and in programming in general is simply a label given to some amount of data. Now, in Lua, variables are typeless. So any label can contain any data type. And in Lua, there are 8 different data types, but we're only going to go over 6 of them for this lesson. And I might briefly touch on the thread type, but it's not something that you're really going to need to know, especially early on. Now, variables can be declared with the local keyword. And to declare a variable, you can simply type local and then the name of your variable. You type the equal sign, and then you can assign a value to that name. So now, if I were to print out the value of name, if I were to save and run this, you can see right here the value 5 is printed out. That's because this label, name, has the value 5. Now, variables also can be global, so you can just declare them with completely without the local keyword, and this is the same thing. So if we save this and run this, it will still print out 5. Now, I already mentioned that there are 6 different types of variables that we're going to talk about in this lesson. And those types are number, string, table, function, Boolean, and nil. So these are the 6 types that I'm going to cover in this lesson. The other 2 types are thread and user data. However, we're not going to talk about user data at all, and if we touch on thread, it will only be briefly. We may cover thread down the line when we talk about coroutines and how to use them, but for this lesson, we're going to stick to these 6 types. So the first type we're going to talk about is string. And a string is just a string of characters. So you can think of this just as text. So now this variable str contains the value of hello world as text. Now, if we print str, you can see that this will print hello world. Now, there's also a type function in Lua. This type function will return the type of whatever the variable that you pass to it is. So we can type print and have it print out what type this is. And you can see that it says string. Lua has a built-in string library, and you can use it to do all sorts of manipulations on these strings. And we will go over that in a later video. But for now, all you need to know is that whenever you're storing text inside of a variable, it's called a string. The second type we're going to talk about is number. Number is pretty self-explanatory. It just is a number. You can do math on numbers. So I can do num plus 2. And if I print this, then it will print 12. Because the value of num was 10, when we add 2 to that, we get 12. The third type is Boolean. A Boolean is simply a true or false. It can also be thought of as 1 or 0. In most programming languages, that is accurate. However, in Lua, you are more likely going to want to be thinking of it as true and false, because the way that conditionals are evaluated in Lua, anything that is not false or nil will always evaluate to true. So if I put in an if statement, and I know we haven't covered this yet, but it's pretty easy to understand. So if I just say if 0, then print hello and end this. 0, the number 0 is going to evaluate to true because it is not false and it is not nil. So this should print hello when we run it. Now, if we go back and actually put false here, then this is not true, so it will not print hello. See, so when you run it, it will print true and it will print false because we're printing these two Boolean variable values, but then this is false, so it does not print. Now, the fourth data type is table. And table is the only data structure that exists inside of Lua. So this is what you're going to be using to define arrays and store different groups of information. And a table is an extremely useful variable type to have, and I will have a lesson dedicated entirely to tables and how to use them and the different functions that they have. Probably more than one lesson, to be honest. But for now, I will simply let you know that this is how you define a table in the most basic form. You set your variable name equal to this curly brace, and you have a closing curly brace, and then you can put your values inside the table like this, separated by commas. You can also do key value pairs. So you can, for instance, have key 1 equals 1, comma, key 2 equals 2. And then when you retrieve a value from the table, you can retrieve it like this. So t.key1 should print 1 because that is the value of key 1 inside this table. You can see here it printed 1. Now the fifth type is function. And again, like tables, I will have probably more than one lesson talking about functions and how to use them. But for now, a function is declared as follows. You can use the local scope or the global scope. Then you use the function keyword and then the variable name. So you actually can assign a function to a variable in the same way. This is just a syntactic sugar, as they call it. These will do the exact same thing, but typically you will see functions defined like this. And if you don't know what a function is, like I said, we'll cover that in a future lesson. But for now, you can see that this variable foo is a function. So when we print this, this is the type of the variable foo. So functions in Lua are actually what are known as first-class values. So when you have a function, you can actually store that inside of a variable like we were talking about, and you can store them inside of tables, and you can pass them as arguments to other functions. So you can actually have a function that will take another function as a parameter, and then you can call that function from inside this other function. If we just define this up here. So here you can see we're calling the function foo with the value foo2. Now foo is going to call foo2 from inside, and it will print this is foo2. So you can see right here we get this is foo2. This is just demonstrating that you can actually pass a function as a value to another function. The sixth and final type that we're going to talk about in this lesson is the nil type. Now, nil is a very special type in Lua. It is a type and it is a value. So the type of this variable var is nil, and if we're just to print the value of var, they're both nil. So if we run this, we get nil twice. Now, nil is actually the essentially default value for all variables that are not defined. So if I simply print foo here and run this, it's going to print nil because we did not assign the value we did not assign any value to foo. So by default, foo is nil. You can also assign the value nil to a variable when you're done using it. And this will signal to the Lua garbage collector that you're no longer using this value and it can get rid of it. This is particularly useful when you're using tables and you no longer want to have certain elements inside the table. You can assign them to nil and they will no longer exist in that table. So if I just type print str down here now and run this, you can see first it prints this is a string and then it prints nil. And it would print nil regardless if we put it up here. So print str, because we haven't defined this yet, it will already be nil. Then we assign it this value. And then once we're done, we assign it nil and it goes away. Here on this, you can see it says nil because it was not assigned. Then it becomes a string. We use the string and we get rid of it. So now that we've talked about the different types of variables, we'll talk about assignment and modification. So you can assign values to variables with the equals operand. What this is basically saying is that I want the value 1 to be assigned to this variable. And we touched on that briefly earlier, but I just wanted to explicitly state that now this is actually what we're doing here. This is not an equality. So this is not saying that x is actually equal to 1. All this is saying is that we're putting this value inside of this operator. So you can get these funny things like this down here where you're taking the same thing on different sides of the equal sign. And this is perfectly valid and actually used quite a bit in programming. And again, all this is saying is whatever the value of x is right here, I want to add 1 to that and then assign this new value back to the same variable. So if you can see up here, we're assigning the value 1 to x. We're going to print out x, and we're going to add 1 to x, and that will become the new x, and we're going to print x again. So when we run this, this will print 1, and then down here, this will print 2. You can see we got 1 and then 2. And you can do the same thing again. You can do x minus 1 and print x. Run it, and you can see that x is now 1 again. You can also have more than one variable, so you can have variable y equal to 5. So we assign the value of 5 to y, and now we can print x plus y, and this will print 1 plus 5, so it will print 6. You can see here it is 6. And again, you can do the same thing where you can assign the value x or the value y to x plus y. And then this value will be whatever this evaluates to. So y will now become 1 plus whatever y is currently, which is 5. So this is 6, and now y will be equal to 6. Previous to this statement, y is 5. After this statement, y is 6. So you can see now if we just print y, we get 6 down here. Now you can combine strings together with this operator right here, this double dot operator. This is also known as concatenating a string. So you can see the string 1 has this value hello, string 2 has this value world. Now I'm creating a new variable, string 3. I am combining string 1 with string 2 and assigning that to string 3. Now when I print out string 3, it will say hello and world. And I'm just going to add a space to this because otherwise it'll put it together. But now when you run this, it says hello world. All right, guys, I believe that's all I wanted to cover for lesson 2 today. So thank you for watching, and I hope this was informative. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and I will try to answer them as best I can. If I missed anything major, I may address it in another video, or I will pin a comment to the top of the comments so that you guys can see my answer if I keep getting, asked the same question over and over again. Just let me know. I will try to respond to every comment that is a question if I have not already answered it. Even if I have already answered it, I will do my best to make sure that you guys understand what's going on. And I hope you'll join me again for lesson 3. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.